panelists. I'm sitting down here listening and realizing that it's way bigger and way deeper than I thought about carbon credits and the integration of all of these things before. I think from what showed up very clearly amongst our panelists is that carbon credits in the context of the wider work that is happening and discussed during this event really offers that opportunity for the balanced integration of economic growth, social well-being, and environmental protection. It is an opportunity for real sustainability if we can get it right, if we can overcome the challenges, and I did not realize there were so many challenges for us specifically in the Caribbean region. So I think I want to kick this off before I invite questions from the audience in getting the perspectives from the panelists on, how does the Caribbean really get ourselves together to benefit from the opportunities? How do we prepare? What do we need to do? And I want to start with looking at policy, legislation, and regulation. Because I know that was mentioned yesterday. I know we have some drafts in Trinidad and Tobago that are there for review and approval, but we have a lot of insights here. So Tadzio, I want to start with you. And from your experience, from the work that you've done, from what you've seen come out, what are the recommendations that you have that you think have worked and we can easily start looking at and integrating into what we do?
Sure. So, CBF specifically as a regional organization also uses a regional approach into answering some of these challenges. And having said that, we really try to involve some of the regional blocks. So we have very close cooperation, collaboration, and also very tight communication lines with both OECS, CARICOM, these regional organizations that we really hope can catalyze sort of frameworks during the ministerials that happen throughout the year. We also give policy recommendations on developing legislation, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, national legislation always trumps sort of these regional initiatives that happen, but we found by really using a regional approach and working together with, especially OECS, I think it's a little bit easier than working together with CARICOM, to really, ensure that there's wide community engagement across the board in all the project countries that we're operational at in the Caribbean. CBF is very lucky in that we also have our staff at CBF spread across various islands within the Caribbean. So that also helps us in terms of local engagement, et cetera, but we really try to focus sort of, when we're talking about policy engagement, when we're talking about discussions that have to do with developing these frameworks that will help facilitate implementation of the various programs that we're involved with, to really use these regional blocks and the expertise, the technical expertise that is available in these regional blocks to sort of drive the changes necessary to sort of facilitate the implementation of our projects across the board. So I'm a very, especially coming from the Dutch Caribbean, St. Martin, that is very disconnected from the rest of the Caribbean in terms of our participation in CARICOM / OECS, et cetera. I really value the sort of collaboration and cooperation that participating in regional organizations brings. So I really urge that, when we have these discussions, sort of scaling up and socializing our projects on a regional scale, that we involve, the regional blocks, so CARICOM and OECS. So that's really where I would place significant focus on in sort of helping to guide the individual nation states in developing their policy frameworks. Excellent.
So definitely collaboration, definitely knowledge sharing into the process of shaping what we do. Mikaela, we have a lot of Caribbean-specific challenges that you spoke about. Very interestingly for me is the scale, yes, but also the scope, the species, what we can actually use in the Caribbean to integrate into these carbon registered projects. What are your recommendations from a policy, a legislative, a regulatory perspective that you would like to put forward so that we are creating an enabling ecosystem, an enabling space where we can start moving towards overcoming these challenges?
Thanks for the question. I think I would back Tadzio on that one in terms of collaboration. I think inherently, of course, we need something that's locally grounded, and coming from the government, that's almost automatic. The first thing I would state is a sense of governance in terms of setting clear rules and transparency around these things. But there's also, the recognition of including various parties in that collaboration, creating incentives for the private sector to get involved, for the community to be involved, for other places like, NGOs, other people within the public sector to be involved. And I think a good example of how this could work is a project that we've worked on at Apollo Group with Uber Mexico. They're supporting a project called Sierra Gorda de Querétaro, which is within the state of Querétaro in Mexico, where they've essentially created a local registry. That state government within Mexico has created a local state registry for that project to be registered on there, and receive funding from the corporations involved. It's a blended finance type of approach, in that they have the corporation Siemens Energy helping out with the technology. They have Uber Mexico, who is purchasing the credits from the project. You have the Sierra Gorda Biosphere Reserve, who is the project developer, and then the actual state government who's making these things happen. And of course, these types of approaches, they do take time, a lot of time, and they require a lot of agreement. But if these efforts are undertaken, they could create space for a lot of advancement of these projects.
Excellent, excellent. So collaboration again, but really that integration, that meaningful integration, inclusion, of all of the different parties involved. And Vandana, you are a party involved on the ground working with Paca, implementing projects right now and going through all of the hurdles. So what are the recommendations that you have from a policy, a legislative, a regulatory perspective?
Right, yes, thank you for the question. So from my perspective, well, there are lots of things, but I'll try to just say a few. In terms of what I think will benefit us here in Trinidad and Tobago, as well as the region, is for the governments to actually set examples as well. So to also lead by doing. So, I love traveling, so I travel a lot. And most recently, I've been spending a lot of time in South America and Central America. And what we've noticed for example, like Costa Rica, we went recently, is that the laws are very strict there. So it filters down to the population, and it filters their actions. They may not always understand at first why certain things are happening, but eventually the population it becomes the norm, it becomes the habit, not littering, not doing the, illegal quarrying, these type of things. It just simply isn't allowed. So essentially we have a tolerance here for breaking the law in Trinidad and Tobago that simply should not be tolerated. We have enough laws, enough policies, enough things have been developed, but they're not enforced. And so people think, well, I know this is illegal, but I'm still going to do it because nothing really happens. And so there's no incentive to do the right thing other than your own individual integrity, which doesn't really apply to, of course, we wouldn't be in the problem we're in now if everyone did the right thing just on their own. What I would also say is, without having those laws enforced, then it does create a lot of gray area for persons like us, project developers, like Mikaela alluded to. Is it illegal quarrying if no one's enforcing the laws, or is it just quarrying? Is it the norm? And so we can't register carbon projects if we don't show additionality. However, if we can't register projects for carbon green financing, there are other ways that we can raise funds, but there's just no clear direction for that. So it does create a lot of confusion, and it does create a lot of leakage as well, because we don't actually know. If we spend a lot of time and effort developing these carbon projects, and then the government decides to change or actually starts enforcing things, it does create a lot of friction and delays and problems for us. And that is a bit of the crux of the problems that we're having with our projects. It's not unique to Close the Loop or to Trinidad and Tobago, but it's unique to the region in that respect.
Thanks for that, Vandana. And I think your Your point there really is speaking to one of those fundamental tenets of sustainability where your systems need to be integrated and the work that you're doing need to be integrated and connected so that we are addressing the challenges collectively. Tracey, the energy sector is one of our most diverse sectors, local players, international players. The energy sector is also not a stranger to collaborating on addressing issues. So from a policy, legislative, regulatory sort of perspective, what sort of recommendations do you have maybe that can be considered for facilitating or enabling collaboration, particularly with international energy companies, to invest in or to support local, regional projects specifically towards registration for carbon credits?
I think we just have to continue with the collaboration part of it. I think we've started it. I think NGC has been on the forefront, liaising with the international energy players. I just think we need to maybe go out there some more, maybe be more involved in conferences such like these, and really promote Trinidad and promote what we can do and maybe how we could collaborate. So I would like some more exposure maybe to different conferences and where we can just network and forge relationships there. I think we're doing a good job so far in like solar projects, liaising with BP and Shell on that. We're also doing something with landfill gas, with SwimCall. So we are collaborating, I guess, but maybe specifically at the local level, but I guess I'd want to see more international growth in that regard. And I just want to remind people that time is against us. We're in 2025, talking about 2030. 2030 is right there. And I think we really need to speed up the process. I think we are talking, and talking is good, but I think more action is required at this time.
Excellent, thank you. And folks in the audience, if you have questions, I'm sure you have burning questions, please feel free to make your way to the microphones, and I'll see you and I'll give way for you. Oh, we have a question? Straight to the mic then, my good lady. We can hear you now.
Okay, so I am wearing an associated hat to the one that I wore yesterday, so I'll introduce myself again. I'm Pat. Today I'm wearing the hat as I am a GHG accounting lead verifier. So I have ISO 14063 certification, which I don't use because in dinosaur days when I got it, people were like, well, why would you want to quantify anything related to carbon credits? That's not a real thing. So I'm very energized by the conversations this morning. And I would like to make a comment on sustainable systems. And sustainable systems need people to drive the thought processes behind these systems. They need experts to do quantification. They need people to write up these projects, to do the cost-benefit analysis, to access funds like the green fund that was spoken about yesterday. And I'm not seeing those skill sets really in the region. I would like to throw out a challenge to this group. What are the skills that we need to get into these markets, despite what is happening in the political environment? We spoke about credits have to be verified that they will last 100 years. So this need to quantify and do this work is going to be needed for generations. I'm seeing so many young people come up to me and say, I want to get into climate change work, but I don't know how. I have a degree in banking, but I can't find a job. I was like, well then, maybe you should look at climate finance, green finance, blue bonds, green bonds, debt swaps. Oh, I've never heard of those things. I don't know where to start. We're in an educational institution now. Are there courses here that feed into that? Do we need to start earlier? Are we talking about, I'll call it O-levels because that's what I know it has. It has a different name now. But, do we need to start career counseling to tell people how can they get into markets that provide the support services that drive this transformation, and that we don't go to donors to hold out our hand to pay consultants $1,000 a day to get this work done, and when they're finished, they're gone. So I just want to try to throw that out to the group. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that point. You know, I think looking back on my career, one of the most fulfilling aspects that you know, I've encountered in the years that I've been working is, you know, guiding, you know, children that were 11, 12, 13 years old, and I'm going to age myself here. This is about 15, 16 years ago, and who are now professionals and much better than I was or ever will be in this conservation space. So I really think, you know, capacity is a challenge in our region. We are small communities, small islands. I mean, I come from an island that is 32 square miles and is divided by two different, you know, we have a Dutch side and a French side. So I think capacity building, capacity development really is crucial to any type of project, any type of program that we implement, and it is a critical component. Sometimes it's even an afterthought, oh, let's add an educational component so that we can check the box, et cetera, but it should be a focus to really build our local capacity in the region to address the issues which will be, or to address the challenges which will pose an existential threat to what it means to be a Caribbean person. You know, our lives, our livelihoods, our culture will all be affected by the impacts of climate change, by the impacts of biodiversity loss, by changing landscapes. So the only way that we can address that is through building capacity, focusing on education, and building up our own people to be able to address these challenges. And you're exactly right in mentioning we should not be beholden to these, you know, large international bingos, big international NGOs or funding agencies. I would love to see a Caribbean where we ourselves can rise to the challenge internally as a region and build that capacity to rise to or to address what will be an existential threat to our lives and livelihoods moving forward. So I really appreciate your comment, and thank you so much for that. Thank you.
Excellent. Anyone else from the panel wants to join in here?
Sure. I would also like to say that encouraging young people to get involved with the groups that are doing the work on the ground, you know, become a member of IAM or volunteer, or, you know, the different NGOs, Cropper Foundation, we have Heroes Foundation, you know, just actually letting people be exposed to the work that's happening on the ground can be inspiring as well. I'm not so much sure about what I could recommend in terms of academics, but I definitely think that just actually action really doesn't go a long way in inspiring career paths.
I can also add on to that one. Just to complement, I think the fact that, you know, those people are already so willing to learn is already an important aspect. And I think that will drive the creation of that skill set as it goes forward. I think, you know, curiosity is the most important thing. And with that curiosity, you know, taking action from there. And I use myself as an example here, because I personally have no academic background within sustainability. I come from an international business management background, actually. And, you know, I took part in some climate advocacy events, mainly because I was curious about the space. And it's gotten me today working into corporate sustainability, merging those two. So it's really just a matter of being curious of it and being willing to take action about that curiosity. That gets you into the spaces with the people that are already action focused and can point you in the right direction. So it's from there that you gather the practical experience and you know, like, you figure things out along the way, regardless of how nerve-wracking it might be in the process. But I think sustainability, that space is a really good industry to develop in that way.
I'd just like to make a plug for actuaries. So there's actually a subcommittee within the actuarial group on climate change and sustainability. So we're looking at ways for mechanisms to verify data, using our analytical skills to kind of maybe forge a path within that area. So it is something that's being looked at, and maybe in a few years to come, we would have maybe the skill set available within the Caribbean. Perhaps me, I don't know, but that could be an option.
Excellent, and Jonathan, I think this is a discussion point that we need to have another panel and group working session on going forward. Now, we are almost out of time for the panel discussion, but we have a gentleman standing up in the back there. So I want to take his question in, sorry, we have a few things happening. Okay. So let's take your question down in the back, and I will see how much time we get additional to continue the conversation since people are very excited.
So this question is for Ms. Hinds. Yesterday we went very in-depth talking about the carbon bonds themselves. And I wanted to see if there's a possibility to link it in using the financing of the carbon bonds to finance carbon credit projects. And if there's another possibility of integrating it into farming, seeing as farming and food production in Trinidad is something that's on the forefront of everyone with food security. If there's the possibility that we can use carbon sequestration in farming in Trinidad on a larger scale, but use the green bonds to secure the carbon credits for farming.
Most definitely, and that's what creates, that circular cycle and what exactly the Caribbean islands are looking for in terms of linking different things. So from the outset, both of them have their requirements in terms of whether it's a green bond or a carbon credit. They have their requirements as to what projects you're able to support under each, as we would have mentioned throughout all the presentations between yesterday and today. But in terms of carbon project development, the idea for standards in being able to certify that project, they really just look to see if you have the capacity to execute that project, not necessarily where you get that money from. It could be grant funding, it could be your own funding, it could be philanthropic, blended, whatever. It's just a matter of your technical and financial capacity to execute it. And so, once the results of those credits, where that revenue from the credits are going, once that aligns with the requirements of the bond, I don't see an issue with it. And so it could align with agriculture as well, because those are types of carbon projects that we see coming out of the market.
Sure. We can keep going with the questions.
Okay. When promoting sustainability, the idea is integrating the whole question of ESG impact into your business, changing the status quo, integrating it as business as usual. Do any of you see a conflict of carbon credits, promoting carbon credits, with the idea of promoting sustainability? Given that sustainability is about really changing the status quo, and that all businesses should consider environmental, social, governance impact in just the way they operate, in the way they do business. Do you see that there could be a conflict in carbon credits, or maybe carbon credits and bonds, green bonds, blue bonds, etc., could have a limited time span, maybe over the next 20, 30, 40 years or whatever, but after that, it's all about sustainability being business, part of our business, the way we do business.
Oh, okay. Okay, thanks for that question, Marie-Louise. So I would say that with regards to, we understand that the carbon credit world is under a lot of scrutiny. And we see that as a positive because it should be heavily scrutinized. And Tracey talked a lot about greenwashing, and that's of course why it's being heavily scrutinized. However, as we also saw yesterday, there are industries that are hard to abate. Mm-hmm. So we are always going to be emitting carbon, unfortunately, for a very long time, I think for all of our lifetimes at least, because we need buildings, we need cement, we need steel, we need transportation, and until we can completely transition away from these industries without emitting carbon, there is a need for these industries in particular to somehow offset their activities. Now, I'm not sure about exactly what it looks like. Tracey might be able to speak to that a bit more for the energy sector in terms of how long that transition might be and when it might so-called expire if it becomes business as usual to be environmentally sustainable. But right now, it's not business as usual, and so I think that the carbon credit and green bond market set a foundation to force us to actually take some action. With regards to green bonds, I would say that there are certain green bonds, like for example, we're looking at the Northern Range Conservation. And that is something that would actually be more relevant for the government of Trinidad and Tobago to pursue. And they would be the ones pursuing the government. And so the government's job is not necessarily to make a profit, but it's to preserve our natural assets and and improve life for the citizens. So there is a role for these mechanisms, and it's not always about the profits or the business, but it's more about ensuring that we can kind of bring it back to a level playing field for the environment, biodiversity, and as well as the core benefits that we mentioned, such as community engagement, job creations, and biodiversity improvement. So again, it's not always just about, you know, the profits that these businesses can generate. So Mikaela.
To complement that, I definitely understand your sentiment in terms of, you know, it being potentially controversial, because there are cases where, you know, a company could purchase carbon credits to offset their emissions and still continue or even increase the amount of emissions that they release into the atmosphere. But once they purchase credits that amount to the same amount that they release, then, you know, technically they're carbon neutral. So I can definitely see where that controversy would come in. But I want to step in and offer like maybe a potential solution or a way to look at it, at least from in working with corporations, is that, you know, corporations, it doesn't necessarily have to be just a one-off transaction. When it comes to purchasing carbon credits, actually there's so many other ways to become much more involved with the project, in terms of like continuously buying from them, but also even, you know, engaging with them from inception of the project, and ensuring that, you know, things are going as they say, and you know, there's even some companies that have people or like hotels that have guests that go on to projects, sustainability projects that they support, like planting trees and stuff. So they incorporate it into, I guess, like their operations and their brand image, and that automatically, I would say, gets them a bit more involved and a bit more attuned to the importance of it. But yeah, I think that's another way to look at it to maybe overcome that controversy.
Great. Now, folks, we are out of time and we are standing in the way between you and lunch, but I'm seeing excited faces here. So I'm going to crave your indulgence. Take a quick question from Jonathan, a question from the guy in the back, and a question from the guy who's been weaving for the whole panel. We'll take the questions and see if we get a chance to answer the questions before we just close off and get you all to lunch.
Cool. Thank you very much, Lawarence, and also for you guys obliging, everyone for your patience as well. But Tracey, this question is for you, and I'm asking if you can speak on behalf of NGC if you know, but also if by chance you have any knowledge of other industry players. And the reason is actually we had originally invited Dax Driver to be on the panel, but they have the energy conference coming up, and so they could, he couldn't join for that reason. But it was really to get a bit of feedback from the bigger energy space as well. And so I suppose my question would be, we've obviously done nice reforestation projects and efforts in Trinidad and Tobago, and a lot of these international energy companies, they have their global mandates to meet net zero or to try to offset and that kind of thing. So what do you think, and again, it could be on behalf of NGC, but I'm also very curious about the others, but what is the appetite for choosing to offset locally,
No, she told me how
if,
because she
and I have to say hopefully when, that becomes available. And the reason I say that is, of course, these companies are benefiting so much from this country, that there's an opportunity coming where they can give back to the country. And for key things like other targets, even if, Keisha would have spoken to this, but where the credits would now apply to their companies versus the country, it can still present really big givebacks, you know, on things like, especially the UN, using
marketing
reforestation as an example, but the UN Convention to Combat
and
Desertification, land degradation,
you
neutrality
anything.
targets,
The
that's
next
another very
one,
important
Kendra,
agreement
she
alongside
called
the
me,
Paris
I'm going
Agreement.
down to head office
So
for meeting.
by
I said, meeting
offsetting
with who?
locally, they're actually helping to
Yeah, she will
regenerate and
meet with,
reforest
oh,
landscapes,
okay.
create
But
jobs
I'm going down
locally,
to
improve
office
water
for
supplies.
meeting.
So I'm just quite curious about that because we have the energy space here, and if that becomes available, is that something they'll jump on recognizing and they get both the credits, but they can actually help, quote unquote, regenerate and save Trinidad and Tobago in that regard? So I'm curious for NGC side, I don't know if you know about the others as well.
Yeah, I can't see them saying no. I definitely think that they will jump on board. I think though they will be cognizant of the market forces, so the demand and supply and maybe the price of it will actually dictate maybe where they will trade. So I think we have to be careful of that. And then remember I also mentioned the types of credits and what impacts the credits in terms of the location of the project, type of project, quality of the project. So those factors will play a role, but I can't see them saying no. So I think once we create this kind of environment that is embracing, that they will definitely, including NGC, be on board.
Excellent. Guy down at the back.
Hi, morning everyone. Karen Bascom here from Tech for Agri. I more have a contribution, having listened to the gentleman here concerning farming and the importance of preventing greenwashing and finding that structure for carbon credits. I wanted to just introduce the Climate Smart Agriculture Compliance Model. It's more focusing on a climate premium. And I know that we discussed that a lot of the stakeholders have different agendas or they have different goals, and we know that profit shouldn't be the only one. So we have this tool that is available and very robust, meaning that all of the stakeholders at the ground level to high level discourse meet their targets per se or their agendas per se. So you have things like the United Nations frameworks and conventions on biodiversity and desertification and things like that, on climate change, climate justice and just transition, all being taken into account via this one tool. So it's not exactly a carbon credit, but as I said, a climate premium. So there's a lot of benefits and incentives, and it's being rolled out at the national level. I know that training took place recently in Jamaica, Dominica, and St. Vincent, now for this 2025. So if anyone's interested, I can pass on the information. It's run by Mr. Steve Maxime of Science-Based Initiatives. They are based in Grenada. He is a Trinidadian, but they're based in Grenada. Yes? So just a contribution in terms of helping find that middle point that everyone is seeking to really truly collaborate. We understand that there's a lot of talk, but now again, we have to take action, and this model is a concrete way to achieve something that the carbon credits would like to achieve.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And very, very briefly, if you can get our last question, as briefly as possible.
Hi, good morning. My name is Karen Niles. I am with the Freetown and the University of the West Indies. I am the program coordinator for the Masters of Science and Climate Studies across all 5 campuses. So you talked about climate education, and certainly the MSc in Climate Studies that is currently available has specializations in health, food security, climate justice, sport and tourism, and coastlines. And we're looking at other concentrations as well, particularly finance. Certainly when it comes to education, I would say encourage young persons to get skills across different fields, because we need good bankers, we need good attorneys, we need persons from different, we need actuaries that are solid so that they can be trained in climate science. So we need people from different fields, so I wouldn't want to necessarily pigeonhole persons to say, well, go do geography, go do environmental science, go do what they're passionate about, and apply it to saving the planet. I think that's really important. And then the other issue is, I think the growing frustration of activists around climate credits for the sake of academic transparency is it can have the effect of slowing down ambition, right? It can really put like a wet pillow on companies moving more aggressively to simply cut their emissions and to totally transform their productive processes. Because if they can, to be honest, if they can make a profit off of emitting or buying or selling carbon credits, or simply not doing anything, as you said, and buying carbon credits and claiming to be carbon neutral, if the numbers are seen to them that's more profitable, 9 out of 10 business people are simply going to do that. And now in the current climate, and the reason why that's so frustrating to negotiators is because we're not in a situation where we're doing okay and we're progressing towards our targets. We're in a reality where even if every single country kept their commitments, their nationally determined contributions, even if all of the countries kept their commitments, it still would not be enough to get us to the target, right? So that's the context that we're in. That's the reason why persons are so utterly frustrated with Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, which allows for carbon credits, which, by the way, the Paris Agreement is legally binding, but we can talk about that another time. But activists would always say, they worked very hard for the Paris Agreement to be legally binding, and Article 6 is in there to encourage investment, not to slow ambition, and that's the reason for the frustration. Thanks very much, and have a great day.
Excellent. Y'all, thank you very, very much for your contributions, panelists. Thank you very much for all that you shared. I definitely think there's a lot of collaboration that's going to happen, a lot of discussions and networking here. So with that, we have come to the end. Thank you all very much and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Yeah.
you.